So here's the thing about Scrum Masters versus project managers. Project managers are method agnostic, and Scrum Masters, they are tied to Agile. They are literally in the name, Scrum Master. Therefore, Scrum has to be the methodology or approach, some variation of Scrum. And that is why it just boggles my mind that we split the project manager role into Scrum Master and Delivery Manager instead of just having an Agile project manager.
And you know that I feel that having a Scrum Master hurts my ability to do my job as a project manager, because the project manager has to have all the details. I don't like getting things secondhand. The question is, if we look at the future of the Scrum Master, is the role completely going to go away? Is the role only going to expand where they become the Agile project manager? Or do we think there's still a place for just Scrum? Is there any circumstance that there's a place for just Scrum Masters? Because again, you look at SAFe, they've got the release and train engineers, they've got the others. There's a reason Scrum was put in place and it works well. So I'm just wondering, is there still a place for someone who just manages the team sprints and keeps those things on track? Because the project manager still has to know all of those details.
But again, it gets to the point of, I'm not familiar with having a Scrum Master and a project manager on the same project. I feel like that's a duplicate of resources. The Scrum Master is specifically about the enforcement of a particular methodology and the ceremonies that are associated with it. It's not even necessarily just the Agile principles. It is literally the framework itself. And then the Delivery Manager is for the budget, the risk management, and the stakeholder communications that are not in the role of the Scrum Master, while a project manager has all of it.
If the Scrum Master is just making sure the processes are enforced, then ultimately we're saying Scrum Master is going to expand to Agile Project Manager or just go away because we have Agile Project Managers. But there is a role we haven't talked about yet, and that is there is the Agile Coach.
Yeah, I'm not trying to laugh at the concept, but what is the difference between an Agile Coach and a Scrum Master?
That's exactly where I'm going.
Scale.
But that's exactly where I'm going. Is an Agile Coach basically trains teams on, or coaches teams, make sure they're following those principles. So maybe if the Scrum Master role goes away, or rather just gets expanded to be what it really truly should be, to have the full scope, then maybe you want to start seeing, if a company is truly agile, right? Maybe you want to see the introduction of more Agile coaches to make sure that teams are following that methodology. I know, because I don't like sticking to specific methodologies all the time either, but maybe that's where that balance is.
Okay, fine. If you were to take this to an enterprise level, then you would need an Agile set of coaches. The problem is most enterprises practice Agile or its variations in pockets of the organization differently. And so when you have that interdependency, one is using Scrum, one is using SAFe, one is using hybrid, and you have to collaborate together. And so the Agile coach's effectiveness dwindles fast.
I think where it would be most useful is you go into a truly safe environment, because that's complicated.
Okay, but you mean safe in that
scale? As in the scaled Agile framework. Sorry, yes. Safe and not safe as in
safe.
Like psychologically safe or anything. But no, because it's interesting to me. And see, you've experienced things differently. You've been in organizations where you've got some teams who are doing Waterfall and some teams who are doing Agile and some or Scrum and then Kanban and then
the other variations
and all variations, right? Yeah. But in my experience, I have not faced that except at one company that was so large at every single team. They just did whatever they want. And then I was struggling to put into a whole operational excellence center to drive standardization and governance and stuff. Okay. But at a lot of my companies, we all ran, and they were enterprise companies, but they were massive, a couple thousand people, right? We ran things identically the same. And that was super important also because we had shared resources. So shared resources across the entire enterprise. So we ran it the same. So I don't even know if I would need or if I would want a a Scrum or an Agile coach there because like we're all doing it the same way. We're not really like we follow the methodologies anyway. But here's the thing, and here's something we ran into, which takes us back to is the Scrum Master needed. Okay.
Right.
The one thing we ran into was that when you've got the entire organization doing the exact same method and you have all of these resources that are trying to balance getting to every single stand up and every single planning and every single retro and then suddenly it's, do you need that resource to help? For me, I still want to find a way to get to the stand up myself as a project manager. I just want to know, is it on track? Do I need to unblock this? Where are we at with the commitment we met? And I like to be on the ground and troubleshoot with the team in the parking lot. I do not want to get that secondhand because if I get it secondhand from a Scrum Master, then I'm having to go chase all that information down later all over again. And so it becomes more work for me. And I don't ever feel in the loop. And that's part of the issue of moving up to program too.
And there's 3 things that I want to highlight here. And I don't know if they're all going to tie together, so just bear with me. The first is that an agile coach's effectiveness is based on the top-down support of the entire approach for projects, programs. If there isn't support, then the agile coach just becomes noise because you don't have the power in order to supplement it. The second piece is that large enterprises tend to have a specified prescriptive methodology that they use, especially if a PMO is involved. They've already determined what they want to use. And the third element, which gets to the concept of the Scrum Master role again, is that there's this big misnomer that Scrum Masters are the only people-centric leadership role in project methodologies. Project managers are task and results oriented. They don't care about people, which is absolutely the most careless thing to state because project managers have larger relationships to manage. If you split the Scrum Master and the Delivery Manager role, you now have less people that you need to manage because the Scrum Master is literally managing the self-managing teams. But a project manager has to deal with the business stakeholders, the core team, the third-party dependencies. And this gets even further when you have third-party vendors. I've ran into a situation when I was a Scrum Master where we were doing Scrum, but the third-party vendor was doing Waterfall. Can you imagine how much fun that was in having a creative agency using Waterfall and we're under Agile and having to force that into the same timeline? Never mind the concept that there's TI planning, which elongates planning. And if you have it across different teams that are not under the
PI
same
planning is safe. PI planning is a framework. Exactly. So you're pulling in a third methodology. Okay.
There's that third piece, which is basically if you put Scrum, Waterfall, Safe, and other methodologies, they all have different timings. And if you have to coordinate among them, that's a nightmare. An absolute nightmare.
So how did you do it, Justin? Because it's easier to coordinate Safe with Scrum because they still have their release trains. They still you can find a way to line up sprints, and quarterly planning makes sense. But how did you manage that with Waterfall? Because Waterfall, then you've got this iterative method where you guys could change direction at any point or at theoretically any 2 weeks, but it could happen anytime in reality. And then you've got Waterfall, if they're strict Waterfall, and it's a design agency, which doesn't even make sense because that's like a creative process. It should be iterative.
Remember, this is old,
so how did you do this?
Agile first started, but yes, they shifted to Agile over time.
Oh, did they? Okay.
What we had the problem is they couldn't change. They couldn't pivot.
Right.
We're down this whole thing. And so we'd have to just, in my Scrum planning or in my sprint planning, I would have to build a buffer for any kind of additional scope that comes from the business or any kind of scope that needs to be pulled out. And so when I was doing the sprint retrospective and reviews, I would have an element of calculating how far off were we from the original sprint plan. And this wasn't for velocity or burn down or any of that micromanagement methods. It's to understand that the requirements and the business context kept changing and that we needed to work towards a more collaborative effort. In other words, we needed both entities to move towards an agile approach or a waterfall hybrid and agile approach. Otherwise, it wasn't going to work. You'd be locked up here. You're waiting for all of the content. So we would have to streamline. We'd have to do specific coordination planning.
Yeah. So you're like also having to then plan, having like your scheduling and dependency management was going to require you guys can even break up a lot of the work and do it separately. So if you had to sit and wait for something to be approved from the design agency side, you at least wouldn't be blocked and you could go and work on something an entirely different feature at the time, which I mean, oh geez.
We definitely did bug fixes a lot. We just picked from the backlog and we're like, all right, we're completely blocked on this one. And there's nothing we could do. Obviously, the client is the one who can enforce standards and expectations. But if in the SOW, statement of work, it says that they are waterfall or they have their particular method and the client doesn't want to push back on it, then you just have to operate within that context. But I want to get back to something. As we talk about it,
we're talking about a Scrum Master start.
Scrum Masters and their future. And we touched on it a little bit, but here's the thing. Scrum Masters, when we talk about the marketplace isn't looking for Scrum Masters anymore. They're looking for people who are familiar with Scrum, who can do the delivery management work. And that just gets back to an Agile Project Manager. The entire movement, the desire of a Scrum Master is moving towards management again, because there are more shared resources, like you mentioned before. And there is also the consolidation of expenses. We can't have a middle person that's involved in all of the information gathering, especially in dynamic projects. The more layers there are, the less agile we are. And I don't mean agile in the sense of agile principles, agility in responding to dynamic changes in the project.
Yeah, interesting. So really, are we just saying the Scrum Master role is dying? Or that the Scrum Master role is changing? It's evolving.
Because I've been a Scrum Master and I would not pay for one because they have such a Diet Coke of responsibilities. And I might get really berated for this. Coke? Diet Coke, in terms of Coke versus Diet Coke. And it's a term of phrase for, it's not the full version. The project manager is the full version, manages the risks, the issues, the communication, the budget, the timeline, the relationships. Scrum Master is managing the teams and making them adhere or follow the processes of both Agile principles and Scrum framework.
I'm still going back to your whole Diet Coke thing.
The Diet Coke.
Okay, Scrum Master role. I never heard that before.
You've never heard that? That was literally a meme. You're the Diet Coke version of X.
Oh, you'll have to show it to me later. But so the Scrum Master role is evolving, or we think in the future it will be forced to evolve, especially given it seems that the market is looking for less and less Scrum Masters because they want to pay one rate for someone who can do more.
Yeah, but that gets even more difficult when it comes to AI. Sprint planning, backlogs, they're all in a consolidated piece of data.
Yeah.
You can automate most of the Scrum Master role already.
I don't agree with that at all.
I know you don't, but I'm saying, and I'm not saying, maybe I should preface this, I can't do it yet, but you are moving towards a far more likely automation of the Scrum Master role than the Project Manager role, because of the reporting, because of the sprint planning, because of the story creation, and the ability to adhere to ceremonies. There can be just validation checks. There can be any kinds of different automation tools to force a Scrum framework.
Yes, we already have tools like Jira or other stuff that will show us what our velocities were. We can see what the trends are. The data can get fed into AI. You can put out any reports or just feed it into a Jira dashboard. Although at this point, I agree that it'd be faster to put it into AI than build a Jira dashboard. But I don't agree that the Scrum Master role can be automated, or just that role managing of Scrum, like their ceremonies, because
Why?
one, you have to feed it its data. Two, it can't tell you what the priorities are because that's going to shift based on what's going on in the marketing world, the product management world, the actual outside market world, that, oh, there's a competitor or something. So things are
Right,
going
but
to
that's the
change.
product owner's role. They don't prioritize. The backlog is prioritized based off of the product owner. If they are following the Scrum
I
framework of
know,
backlog grooming, sprint planning, then these things just get automated, pulled straight from the
but
backlog.
you
No, there's
can't.
nuance,
You
but you
can't.
can't tell me that you're not going to automate parts of it.
I wouldn't, because it's a partnership, and
Don't get me wrong. I just hate AI.
I know you
But
do.
if I were to look at it from a conceptual perspective, this is the most consolidated pieces of data is in Scrum.
Okay, but here's why. And maybe if you don't have outside things that are coming in, outside scope creep that's coming in,
Right.
then maybe it's more possible. But in reality, okay, is the way I see it, even if I set up with my product manager or product owner, I've did the same thing with the companies I've worked with, okay? When you work with that, I will go through all the priorities. I'll know where I want to hit on next. That's based on, are we going to get late dependencies? Like marketing's not giving us our deliverables on time. So now a ticket isn't ready anymore. It's not going to be ready on time, et cetera. You do as much planning as you can. You come into sprint planning. You see what tickets roll over that were not completed.
Right.
But then you are working with your team to see what can still get brought in, correct? What can get brought into the next sprint based on developers finish it at this date so that QA can finish it by this date. But then you have the outside dependencies of, oh no, I can't actually do this because I have to go work on this other stuff, or other stuff came in from other teams, or something is taking longer, you run into an issue. So AI can't, unless AI is fed all of that data, they're not going to be able to speak to the fire drills, or everything went down and suddenly they got pulled off of something, right? Or they're getting pulled off of something because that different project needs a resource. So AI can't do that. You can't automate that because that's a live conversation in planning. I have gotten planning to smooth out where I've been able to get it through it fast, where it used to be like 2 hours, get it down to 15 minutes. It's so organized, but I've never in my life seen a sprint fully complete, ever. Never.
Oh, I guess that's where we differ.
Are you telling me that your team's commitments, you've seen it land where they meet every single ticket closes on time all the time?
Not all the time, but I'm saying I've completed sprints in where they've completed their tickets and then some.
I haven't. There's always one or two that get left over, at least.
Okay.
Always.
And that's fine. That's the reality. But you know how I feel about automating project management roles.
Yeah.
And you also know that Scrum Masters have a people component.
Yes.
But if you were to compare the two, which one would be more likely to be automated because it's more standardized? There's more nuance in the project management role because you have dependencies that are outside of a team that have to come into play. But a Scrum Master role within a self-managed team, where, by the way, the Scrum Master could be any one of the other team members. They don't need to have a Scrum Master. People who lead the who lead the ceremonies could be another team member.
They can, and I've had that. When like you're out, you go, who covers for me? And an engineer or a QA will raise their hand and be like, I got it covered for you while you're out. It's easy. Right. It's just a ceremony you're running. Yeah.
But the people component, yes, you're not going to be able to automate that. There's a lot of nuance. And there's also the business context shifts. But remember, sprints are in a time box. I think of Agile in itself as more rigid than Waterfall hybrid. Because in Waterfall hybrid, things change. You flip the plug immediately. There are some organizations that will say, no, we're going to get through the rest of our sprints and then we'll address it. And I'm like, in what world does that make sense? I know that doesn't follow the concept of Agile principle to the T, but there are gray areas everywhere. So to put that into context, that means between the two and even the delivery manager, you could probably automate a lot of that too, because it's just the budget, the risk management, within a
Oh,
particular.
no. That's different thing, but no, I absolutely 100% vehemently say you cannot automate risk and the budget and
The budget
resources.
you can't,
No.
risk you can't, budget you can.
Okay, I guess you can for budget, but why would you start input into something else? Just a waste of time.
It depends on if it's connected, right? I don't
Yeah.
know how the AI model connects and pulls data because every business has it different, but you wouldn't use OpenAI. Absolutely, that's personal information and all of that. But again,
let's just make our budget available to the entire world right now. Okay, well, wait. So we have to wrap up.
Yeah.
We have to wrap up because I have a call in a few minutes. Okay. So Scrum Master role is evolving.
Yes, Scrum Master role is evolving. I think it is a Diet Coke version of a project manager. Again, we'll talk about that meme later. But the project manager role in an agile environment has been split into a Scrum Master and Delivery Manager role.
All right. And we're seeing in the market already that there's less
demand,
or demand is the right word, for Scrum Masters. So we'll see what happens. We'll keep following that along because that's what our audiences want to know. But
if anyone feels they want to join the conversation, drop it in the chat. We're happy to hear from your opinions as well. I know there are a lot of delivery managers and Scrum Masters who are ready to throw the book at me, but I've been in the Scrum Master role, a project manager, and a program manager role. This is based on my personal experiences and my methodologies.
All right. With that, I have to go. So you're going to say cheers, aren't you?
I am.
You're gonna
Until
be
next time. Cheers.
Bye.